Tommy Robinson, a controversial figure known for his outspoken views on immigration and political issues in the United Kingdom, has recently taken aim at Prime Minister Keir Starmer, accusing him of poor leadership and laying the blame for the anti-immigration riots squarely at his feet. Robinson's comments have sparked heated debates across the political spectrum, especially given the context of rising tensions surrounding immigration in the country. His accusations against Starmer have brought to light deeper concerns about the handling of immigration and whether current policies are fit to address the challenges that the UK faces today. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. Robinson's critique focuses on what he perceives as Starmer's failure to address the root causes of the anti-immigration sentiment that has been growing among certain segments of the British population. He argues that the Prime Minister's leadership has been ineffectual in curbing the increasing frustration felt by citizens who believe that immigration is not being properly managed. According to Robinson, this failure has contributed to a climate in which riots and protests have become almost inevitable, as people feel that their concerns are being ignored by the political elite. In his view, the government has turned a blind eye to the very real issues facing communities that have experienced rapid changes due to immigration, leading to a breakdown in social cohesion. The anti-immigration riots that have recently swept through parts of the UK are symptomatic of deeper societal fractures that Robinson claims Starmer has failed to address. While Starmer has maintained that his government is taking steps to ensure a fair and humane immigration policy, Robinson argues that these measures do little to assuage the concerns of ordinary Britons who feel increasingly alienated in their own country. The anger and frustration that fuel these riots, Robinson contends, are the direct result of a leadership that is out of touch with the realities on the ground. He believes that the Prime Minister has underestimated the extent of the discontent within the population, and that this has only served to embolden anti-immigration groups who feel justified in taking matters into their own hands. One of Robinson's key points is that Starmer's failure to implement stricter immigration controls has led to a perception that the government is not serious about protecting the interests of British citizens. In his view, this has created a situation in which people feel abandoned by their leaders, and that their only recourse is to express their frustration through protest, and in some cases, violence. Robinson argues that the riots are not merely the result of isolated incidents, but rather a culmination of years of neglect by successive governments that have failed to take decisive action on immigration. He suggests that Starmer, as the current Prime Minister, bears the brunt of the responsibility for allowing the situation to deteriorate to this point. Robinson also accuses Starmer of being overly concerned with maintaining a politically correct stance on immigration at the expense of addressing the genuine concerns of the public. He believes that Starmer's focus on appeasing certain sections of society has led to policies that are more concerned with virtue signaling than with practical solutions to the challenges posed by immigration. In particular, Robinson points to what he sees as a reluctance on the part of the government to acknowledge the negative impacts that uncontrolled immigration can have on housing, healthcare, and employment. He argues that this unwillingness to confront the realities of the situation has created a vacuum in leadership, which has been filled by more extreme voices advocating for radical measures. The riots, in Robinson's view, are a symptom of a much larger problem, one that has been brewing for years, due to a lack of leadership on immigration. He contends that the current crisis could have been avoided if previous governments had taken a firmer stance on the issue, and that Starmer's failure to do so now has only exacerbated the problem. According to Robinson, the Prime Minister's approach to immigration has been too lenient, allowing for a situation in which the country's infrastructure is unable to cope with the demands placed on it by a rapidly growing population. He suggests that this has led to increased competition for jobs, housing, and public services, creating a sense of resentment among those who feel they are being left behind. Robinson's critique extends beyond the immediate issue of immigration, touching on broader concerns about the direction in which Starmer is leading the country. He argues that the Prime Minister's failure to address the underlying causes of the anti-immigration riots is indicative of a wider problem with his leadership style. In Robinson's view, Starmer is more concerned with maintaining the status quo than with enacting the kind of bold reforms that are necessary to tackle the challenges facing the UK. He believes that this lack of vision has left the country vulnerable to further unrest, as disillusioned citizens become increasingly frustrated with a government that appears to be out of touch with their needs. In addition to his criticism of Starmer's handling of immigration, Robinson also takes issue with what he sees as the Prime Minister's failure to engage with the concerns of ordinary Britons. He argues that Starmer's government has been too focused on appeasing the political elite and has neglected the voices of those who are most affected by immigration. Robinson claims that this disconnect between the government and the people has created a fertile ground for the rise of anti-immigration sentiments, as citizens feel that their concerns are not being taken seriously by those in power. He believes that this has contributed to a growing sense of disillusionment with the political system, which has only served to fuel the riots. Robinson's accusations have struck a chord with some sections of the population, particularly those who feel that the government has not done enough to address their concerns about immigration. His criticism of Starmer taps into a broader narrative of discontent with the political establishment, which many believe has failed to take meaningful action on issues that matter most to ordinary citizens. While Starmer has sought to position himself as a leader who is capable of addressing the complex challenges facing the country, Robinson's attacks have called into question his ability to do so effectively. The Prime Minister's handling of the riots and his broader approach to immigration have become central points of contention in the ongoing debate about the future direction of the UK. The implications of Robinson's critique are significant, as they reflect a growing divide between the political establishment and certain sections of the population. His accusations against Starmer highlight the extent to which immigration has become a deeply polarizing issue in the UK, with many citizens feeling that their voices are not being heard by those in power. Robinson's rhetoric, while controversial, resonates with those who feel that the government has failed to protect their interests in the face of rapid demographic change. This sense of alienation has been compounded by the perception that Starmer's leadership is too focused on appeasing special interest groups, rather than addressing the concerns of the broader population. As the anti-immigration riots continue to make headlines, Robinson's critique of Starmer's leadership has gained traction among those who believe that more needs to be done to address the root causes of the unrest. While some dismiss his views as inflammatory, others see them as a reflection of the frustrations felt by many Britons who believe that the government is not doing enough to protect their communities from the negative impacts of immigration. Robinson's accusations have fueled the debate about the future of immigration policy in the UK, and whether the current approach is sustainable in the long term. In the midst of this debate, Robinson's attacks on Starmer have raised important questions about the role of leadership in addressing complex social issues. His critique suggests that the Prime Minister's failure to take decisive action on immigration has not only contributed to the current crisis, but has also undermined confidence in the government's ability to manage the challenges facing the country. For Robinson, the solution lies in a more robust approach to immigration, one that prioritizes the needs of British citizens and addresses the concerns that have fueled the riots. He argues that only by taking a firm stance on this issue can the government begin to restore trust and prevent further unrest. While Robinson's views are unlikely to be embraced by the political establishment, they have nonetheless sparked an important conversation about the direction of immigration policy in the UK. His accusations against Starmer have forced the Prime Minister to confront the growing discontent within the population and to consider whether his approach to immigration is adequate in the face of rising tensions. The riots have laid bare the deep divisions within British society, and Robinson's critique of Starmer's leadership has brought these divisions into sharp focus. As the debate continues, it remains to be seen whether the Prime Minister will be able to navigate these challenges and restore a sense of unity in a country that is increasingly divided over the issue of immigration. The implications of Robinson's critique extend beyond the immediate question of immigration policy, touching on broader concerns about the state of British politics. His accusations against Starmer reflect a growing sense of disillusionment with the political system, and a belief that the current leadership is failing to address the concerns of ordinary citizens. For many, the anti-immigration riots are a symptom of a deeper malaise within the country, one that has been exacerbated by a lack of effective leadership on key issues. Robinson's critique of Starmer taps into this sentiment, offering a stark assessment of the challenges facing the UK and calling into question the ability of the current government to provide the leadership needed to address them. To understand why Robinson's criticisms have garnered attention, it's essential to explore the historical and social context that has set the stage for the unrest surrounding immigration. Over the past few decades, the UK has seen rapid demographic changes driven by waves of immigration, especially from non-European countries. This shift has dramatically altered the cultural and economic landscape of many towns and cities, particularly in areas that have struggled with unemployment and economic decline. For some communities, the arrival of new immigrants has been perceived as an additional strain on already stretched public services, leading to heightened tensions and a growing sense of frustration among certain groups. Robinson has long been a vocal critic of what he perceives as unchecked immigration and its impact on British society. He frames his opposition to immigration not merely as a political stance, but as a defense of British identity and values. According to Robinson, successive governments, including Starmer's, have failed to preserve what he sees as the traditional culture of Britain, allowing immigration policies to transform the country in ways that are detrimental to its original inhabitants. This narrative resonates with segments of the population who feel disconnected from the multicultural policies promoted by mainstream politicians. In this context, Robinson's attacks on Starmer tap into a deeper emotional current, one that ties concerns about immigration to fears of cultural displacement and a perceived loss of national sovereignty. Robinson frequently claims that the ruling political class is out of touch with the working class communities most affected by immigration. He argues that while middle-class urban professionals may embrace multiculturalism, it is the lower-income, often white British communities that bear the brunt of the challenges posed by rapid demographic change. This argument has gained traction in areas where economic opportunities have dwindled, and where residents feel that they are being overlooked by politicians like Starmer, who, in their view, prioritize the needs of immigrants over those of long-established citizens. One of Robinson's central claims is that Starmer's government has not done enough to protect the interests of British citizens, particularly in terms of job security and access to social services. While Starmer has consistently defended his government's stance on immigration as balanced and humane, Robinson argues that such policies disproportionately benefit immigrants at the expense of British-born citizens. He contends that the influx of immigrants into low-wage sectors has depressed wages, made it harder for native Britons to find work, and placed significant strain on housing and healthcare systems. These concerns have been exacerbated by ongoing economic challenges, including the effects of Brexit, the COVID-19 pandemic, and inflation, which have left many working-class citizens feeling vulnerable. Robinson's rhetoric, while divisive, taps into a vein of economic anxiety that has been growing in Britain for some time. Many people who feel economically insecure also perceive immigration as a threat to their livelihoods, and they are more likely to embrace the anti-immigration message. Robinson has capitalized on this fear, using it to bolster his argument that Starmer's leadership has been ineffective and that his policies have failed to protect ordinary Britons from the economic consequences of mass immigration. Furthermore, Robinson's attacks on Starmer also highlight the growing polarization within British society when it comes to national identity. Robinson frequently portrays Starmer as a representative of a globalist elite who is more concerned with adhering to international norms and progressive ideals than with defending the interests of the British people. This framing is particularly effective in an era where nationalism and populism are on the rise across many parts of the world and where many people are increasingly skeptical of globalization and the international order. Robinson's portrayal of Starmer as a politician who puts globalism before patriotism taps into a broader sense of unease about the future of national sovereignty and British identity in a rapidly changing world. This polarization is further exacerbated by the fact that immigration has become a flashpoint for discussions about national identity, values, and the future of Britain. For many of Robinson's supporters, immigration represents a dilution of traditional British culture and values, which they believe are being eroded by the influx of people with different cultural backgrounds. Robinson's critique of Starmer taps into these fears, painting the Prime Minister as someone who is unwilling or unable to protect the cultural fabric of the country. Moreover, Robinson's criticisms of Starmer have amplified the ongoing debate about the balance between immigration and integration. He argues that the government's failure to properly integrate immigrants into British society has contributed to social fragmentation and the rise of parallel communities where newcomers do not fully embrace British values or customs. This failure of integration, Robinson contends, is one of the key reasons for the anti-immigration riots, as native Britons feel increasingly alienated in their own neighborhoods. He suggests that if immigration were more tightly controlled and integration policies more strictly enforced, the tensions between different communities could be alleviated. In response to these critiques, many political analysts have pointed out that Robinson's views are part of a broader populist backlash against the political establishment, which has taken hold in many Western democracies in recent years. This backlash is characterized by a rejection of traditional elites, a deep suspicion of mainstream media, and a preference for political outsiders who claim to speak for the common people. Robinson, with his combative style and anti-establishment rhetoric, fits neatly into this mold. His attacks on Starmer can be seen as part of a wider movement that seeks to challenge the existing political order and replace it with a more populist nationalist alternative. Robinson's critique also reflects the changing nature of political discourse in the age of social media. His ability to spread his message to a wide audience is bolstered by platforms like Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, where he has amassed a significant following. In this digital age, figures like Robinson have been able to bypass traditional media outlets and speak directly to their supporters, creating a parallel media ecosystem that amplifies their views. This has allowed Robinson to build a loyal base of followers who share his skepticism of the political establishment and his belief that mainstream politicians like Starmer are not acting in the best interests of the British people. The use of social media to propagate anti-immigration sentiments has also contributed to the rise of what some have called the alt-right or far-right movement in the UK. While Robinson himself may not explicitly align with these movements, his rhetoric often overlaps with theirs, particularly in his emphasis on the protection of British culture and his opposition to multiculturalism. This has led to concerns among some political commentators that Robinson's attacks on Starmer and his broader anti-immigration message could fuel the rise of more extreme nationalist groups who may feel emboldened by the current political climate. However, it would be a mistake to view Robinson's critiques solely through the lens of right-wing populism. His arguments also tap into a more widespread sense of frustration with the current political system, one that transcends traditional left-right boundaries. Many of the concerns he raises about job security, economic inequality, and the strain on public services are shared by people across the political spectrum. While Robinson's solutions may be controversial, the underlying grievances he addresses are very real for many Britons. This is where Starmer's leadership comes under scrutiny. Critics argue that the Prime Minister has struggled to find a clear, coherent response to the challenges posed by immigration and the rising tensions it has sparked. While Starmer has consistently defended his government's approach as balanced and fair, Robinson's accusations have exposed a vulnerability in the Prime Minister's leadership, namely, that he has failed to articulate a vision for how to manage immigration in a way that both addresses the concerns of ordinary citizens and upholds Britain's humanitarian obligations. Starmer's critics argue that his government has been too reactive, responding to crises as they arise, rather than developing a proactive strategy for dealing with immigration. This perceived lack of leadership has allowed figures like Robinson to fill the void, offering their own solutions, however controversial or extreme they may be. Robinson's message resonates with people who feel that the government has lost control of the immigration system, and that only a more assertive, nationalist approach can restore order. The political implications of Robinson's critique are profound. If his message continues to gain traction, it could signal a shift in British politics toward a more populist, nationalist agenda, with immigration as the central issue. This would pose a significant challenge for Starmer, who has sought to position himself as a unifying figure capable of bridging the divides within British society. However, Robinson's attacks suggest that Starmer may struggle to hold together a broad coalition of voters if he cannot effectively address the concerns of those who feel alienated by his government's approach to immigration. Moreover, Robinson's critique raises important questions about the future of immigration policy in the UK. If Starmer's government is unable to quell the rising tensions surrounding this issue, it is possible that future governments may adopt a more hardline stance in response to public pressure. This could result in stricter immigration controls, reduced refugee intake, and more aggressive policies aimed at promoting integration. While such measures may appease those who feel disillusioned by the current system, they could also lead to further social divisions and alienate immigrant communities. One of the most striking aspects of Robinson's critique is the way it ties the issue of immigration to a perceived erosion of democratic accountability. Robinson frequently characterizes Starmer's government as one that is disconnected from the will of the people, accusing it of prioritizing ideological or international concerns over the direct needs of British citizens. This line of attack resonates with those who feel that their voices are ignored in favor of elite policymaking circles or that decisions about immigration are made without adequate consultation with the public. From this perspective, Robinson's accusations point to a larger crisis of representation, where many believe that their elected officials no longer act in their interests. This perceived disconnect between government policy and public opinion is further fueled by the structure of Britain's political system, particularly the role that centralization plays in decision-making. In the UK, immigration policy is largely determined at the national level, meaning that local communities often have little say over the types of immigration policies that directly impact them. Robinson's critique reflects a broader dissatisfaction with this dynamic. As communities hit hardest by the effects of immigration, such as those in areas of high unemployment or strained public services, feel powerless to influence the direction of national immigration policy. By accusing Starmer of neglecting these concerns, Robinson is amplifying a grievance that goes beyond immigration itself and taps into a wider dissatisfaction with the concentration of power in Westminster. This critique also ties into the ongoing debate about how democratic systems should manage the complex trade-offs that come with immigration policy. While Robinson and his supporters argue for stricter immigration controls and greater accountability to public opinion, others within the political establishment emphasize the need to maintain a balanced and rights-based approach to immigration that respects international obligations and human rights laws. This tension creates a difficult balancing act for political leaders like Starmer, who must navigate between responding to public concerns about immigration and upholding the principles of a liberal democratic state that values human rights, including the rights of asylum seekers and refugees. Moreover, the rise of anti-immigration sentiment, as articulated by Robinson, speaks to a broader trend within Western democracies where populist movements have gained traction by positioning themselves as defenders of national identity against the forces of globalization. In this context, Robinson's critique of Starmer can be understood as part of a global wave of populist rhetoric that portrays immigration as a threat to national culture, security, and economic well-being. This approach has proven politically effective in many countries, where populist leaders have been able to harness widespread fears about cultural displacement and economic competition to build significant electoral support. Robinson's critique of Starmer echoes these global trends, framing immigration as a problem that requires a radical rethinking of traditional political norms. One of the critical undercurrents of this populist wave is the sense that mainstream political parties, whether on the left or right, have failed to address the concerns of ordinary people, particularly when it comes to issues like immigration and national security. Robinson's attacks on Starmer fit neatly within this narrative, as he presents himself as a voice for the silent majority who feel that their concerns about immigration have been ignored by the political establishment. This populist framing creates a powerful political dynamic as it positions Starmer and his government as out of touch with the realities on the ground, while presenting figures like Robinson as champions of the people. The resonance of Robinson's critique is further amplified by the role that media, particularly social media, plays in shaping public opinion. In the age of digital communication, Robinson has been able to build a significant following by bypassing traditional media channels and reaching directly into the homes of his supporters through platforms like Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. This ability to communicate directly with the public without the filtering or editorial control of mainstream media, allows Robinson to present his views unchallenged by counter-narratives. It also enables him to frame his critique of Starmer in highly emotional and evocative terms, which helps to galvanize support among those who are already skeptical of the political establishment. The impact of this direct-to-public communication is profound. For many of Robinson's followers, his critique of Starmer and his broader commentary on immigration are seen as unfiltered truth, while the messaging from traditional politicians and media is dismissed as biased or misleading. This dynamic reflects a growing mistrust of mainstream institutions, including the media, political parties, and even the judiciary, which is characteristic of many populist movements. Robinson's critique of Starmer thus becomes not just an attack on one politician, but part of a broader effort to delegitimize the entire political system, painting it as corrupt and unresponsive to the will of the people. This distrust in institutions also plays into another key element of Robinson's critique: his framing of Starmer's government as being overly influenced by globalist agendas. Robinson frequently accuses Starmer of placing the interests of international organizations such as the European Union or the United Nations ahead of the needs of British citizens. This line of attack taps into a growing sense of nationalism that has been on the rise in the UK since the Brexit referendum, where many voters expressed a desire to reclaim national sovereignty and take back control over issues like immigration. By framing Starmer as beholden to international elites, Robinson positions himself as a defender of British independence and sovereignty, a message that resonates strongly with those who feel that the country's identity and autonomy are under threat. Robinson's critique also intersects with broader debates about the future of multiculturalism in the UK. While many political leaders, including Starmer, continue to support multicultural policies that emphasize the importance of diversity and inclusion, Robinson has positioned himself as a staunch critic of these policies. He argues that multiculturalism has failed to promote integration and has instead led to the creation of segregated communities where immigrant populations do not fully embrace British values or customs. This critique reflects a wider backlash against multiculturalism, which has been growing in many parts of the West as societies become more diverse and questions about national identity become more pronounced. This opposition to multiculturalism is not just about cultural differences, however. It also taps into a deeper sense of economic inequality and insecurity that has been exacerbated by globalization and neoliberal economic policies. For many working-class Britons, particularly those in areas that have experienced industrial decline and economic stagnation, the arrival of immigrants is perceived as an additional burden on an already struggling economy. Robinson's critique of Starmer thus ties together concerns about cultural identity with anxieties about economic displacement, creating a potent political narrative that resonates with those who feel left behind by globalization. In this way, Robinson's attacks on Starmer reflect a broader shift in political discourse, where issues of culture, identity, and economics are increasingly intertwined. The rise of populist movements like Robinson's reflects a growing belief that the traditional left-right political spectrum no longer adequately captures the complexity of the challenges facing modern societies. Instead, new political fault lines are emerging, centered on questions of national identity, immigration, and globalization. Robinson's critique of Starmer taps into these fault lines, positioning himself as a defender of British identity against the forces of cultural and economic change. Furthermore, Robinson's critique highlights the limitations of Starmer's political strategy, which has often been characterized by a cautious and centrist approach. While Starmer has sought to present himself as a pragmatic and responsible leader, capable of navigating the complex challenges facing the UK, Robinson's attacks suggest that this approach may not be resonating with large segments of the population. For those who are deeply concerned about immigration and its impact on British society, Starmer's moderate stance may come across as weak or indecisive. Robinson's rhetoric, by contrast, offers a more clear-cut and assertive response to these concerns, which may appeal to voters who are looking for a more decisive and bold leader. This dynamic underscores a broader challenge for centrist politicians in the age of populism. As figures like Robinson gain traction by offering simple and direct solutions to complex problems, centrist leaders like Starmer may struggle to compete with the emotional appeal of populist rhetoric. Robinson's critique of Starmer thus raises important questions about the future of political leadership in the UK, particularly in an era where populist movements are gaining ground and traditional political parties are struggling to adapt. Additionally, Robinson's attacks on Starmer also bring to the forefront issues of political legitimacy and the role of protest in democratic societies. While the anti-immigration riots that Robinson references have been condemned by many as violent and counterproductive, Robinson himself has framed these events as a legitimate expression of popular discontent with the government's failure to address immigration concerns. This framing raises important questions about how political systems respond to public protest, particularly when those protests turn violent. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, how do you think Starmer should address the ongoing immigration issues? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.